Y'all good? Calling to order the Select Board meeting for October 22nd, 2024. This meeting is being broadcast by the Needham Channel, the town's YouTube channel, and via Zoom. It is being recorded for publication and later viewing. In accordance with the open meeting law, if anyone else in attendance wishes to record the meeting, they are required to notify the chair first, so the chair may inform other attendees. I have received notification from the Needham Observer, but if there's anyone else in attendance that wishes to record the meeting, please notify me at this time. Okay, good, we're moving on. Next item is the public comment. Anyone in the room wish to make a public comment? Miles, anyone on Zoom? Okay. I just also want to, for League of Women Voters trivia fans, this is the second time in one day that the Select Board has met. Last night was town meeting. Okay. Next up, we have it's the 2024 National First Responders Day Proclamation. Karis Lustig, Shane Mark, Chief Conroy, Chief Schlittler, Kristen Scoble, Deputy Baker. Come on up, please. So, October 28th is First Responders Day. Right.
That's correct.
Yes. First responders, as is DPW.
Yes.
Yes, that's good too. Thank you very much. Any comments, thoughts?
No, what we wanted to do to recognize First Responders Day this year is knowing that police, fire, and public works are all considered first responders. We decided it would be prudent for us to join together and join forces and come to receive the proclamation for First Responders Day as a group, because collectively what we do depends so much on each other. Police and fire can't do their jobs unless we're doing our job, and we can't do our job unless police and fire are doing their job. And we work very closely together amongst the three departments. So we thought this would be a great opportunity to come together jointly to receive a proclamation for first responders.
And this start with the Boston Marathon bombing, right? That was asking us to get the one brothers there.
So in 2004, President Bush declared a declaration that public works employees were considered first responders as well. So that's when we were originally recognized as first responders. So going on 20 years now for us.
Okay. I believe, anything else? Ms. Frail, do you have a proclamation?
Town of Needham 2024 National First Responders Day Proclamation. Whereas first responders, including public works professionals, firefighters, police officers, emergency medical technicians, 911 operators, paramedics, and other emergency personnel, stand on the front lines of our communities, selflessly serving and protecting the citizens of Needham in times of crisis. Whereas first responders respond swiftly and courageously to emergencies, often putting their own lives at risk to ensure the safety and well-being of others, whether in natural disasters, accidents, medical emergencies, or public health and safety threats. And whereas it is in the public interest for citizens, civic leaders, and children in Needham to gain knowledge of and maintain an ongoing interest in understanding the importance of public works, fire, police, and other first responder efforts in their respective communities. And whereas 2024 marks the 6th annual National First Responders Day sponsored by bipartisan resolutions in Congress. Now therefore be it resolved that the Needham Select Board does hereby designate October 28th, 2024 as National First Responders Day and urges all residents to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies in activities, events, and ceremonies paying tribute to our public works first responders alongside law enforcement, firefighters, paramedics, emergency medical technicians, 911 operators, and other emergency personnel to recognize the substantial contributions they make to protecting our health, safety, and advancing the quality of life for all. Signed this 22nd day of October, 2024. Thank you.
Make a motion. Any comments?
So moved.
Okay. Second, maybe?
Second.
Oh, great. All right, let's have a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Happy October 28th. Next up on the agenda is, I know it feels like August 52nd out there, but actually November 11th is very soon. It's right around the corner. We're running out of October. So we have a Veterans Day proclamation. Ms. Frail, please read the Veterans Day proclamation.
Town of Needham 2024 Veterans Day Proclamation. Whereas on Veterans Day, our nation comes together to honor our veterans and commemorate their legacy of service and sacrifice. And whereas Needham residents have answered the call of duty in every war and expedition in our nation's history to ensure the security of our country and its ideals. And whereas returning veterans contribute in important ways to the civic life of our town. And whereas their service, performed with a sense of duty and honor, reflects great credit upon themselves and upon our community. Now therefore, be it resolved, the Select Board of the Town of Needham does hereby recognize Monday, November 11th, 2024 as Veterans Day, and asks the citizens of the town to join in appropriate observance of those who have served in uniform to preserve the principles of justice, freedom, and democracy. Signed this 22nd day of October, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Anything? Want to add? Okay. I will add that there is a Veterans Day ceremony on Monday, November 11th, at 11 at Memorial Park. Please be there. I'll be there. Okay. Let's have a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Next up, we have public hearing, Eversource, grant of location. It's for 233 Warren Street. We have Joanne Callender from Eversource.
Sorry, Hannah Cooper from Eversource. I was muted.
Oh, okay. Joanne, did you change your name?
Nope, this is Hannah.
Oh, Hannah, hi, how are you? Good to meet you. All right, let's talk about the grant of location at 233 Warren Street.
Yep, so we're just looking to install 38 feet of conduit in Warren Street. It's for a underground service for a new single-family home with electric vehicle chargers.
It's 38 feet, right?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Anyone on the board have questions, comments, criticisms? All right. This is a public hearing. Does anyone in the room have a comment? Anyone on Zoom, Miles? Okay. This seems easy. Okay. Anyone want to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that the Select Board approve and sign a petition from Eversource Energy to install approximately 38 feet of conduit in Warren Street. Second.
Right? Any other discussion? Hearing none, let's have a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Hannah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. Next up, we have Eversource. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Questions? Comments?
So what percentage increase in capacity do you anticipate from this project?
Yeah, I'll defer to Hector from engineering.
Yeah, so, in terms
Grab a
of,
microphone.
So yes, in terms of capacity and ampacity, we would see about a 50% increase in this.
How's that measured?
So it'd be measured in MVA, which is just voltage and ampacity. So just amps and ampacity and megawatts as well.
So what's existing now?
Currently for MVA, it would be 192. For the future line, it'd be around 350, 320. I would say.
Can we size it differently? I guess I would have said, when you're talking about increasing the capacity, if we're looking at a section of town that's served by the years, 20 years, get converted to electric, can this support it? How do we think about this in terms of electrification of the houses in town?
So, I would say like right now, it would definitely be able to support anything. Even right now, we're not nowhere near, or we are close to capacity, but not really. We'll be able to for sure support about, like I said, about 50% of what is now with an increase.
I think what you have too, when you're thinking of the grid, and we had talked a little bit offline about this at one point, but you're looking at power generation as kind of the first piece, then the transmission, and really what we're talking about here is improving the transmission lines, going from substation to substation. Ultimately, that provides capacity to serve more within the community of Needham, just using Needham as an example, and that's why we're here tonight. But then also you may have to do more work within a community of building more additional infrastructure, like you said in your question, to EVs and things of that nature. So we're beginning to really, or we're taking, a look at all electric sector modernization plans, and we've all filed, each company's filed with the Department of Public Utilities. Those recently got approved, and now we're looking at really how does it break down in each individual community. And so I think there is further discussion that we would want to have with Needham to talk about that and what work will need to happen over the next 10 years. And I know that in areas where, the MBTA housing and things of that nature might be an area of growth in different communities. So there's more to come, but this is fundamentally a core piece of it, but it's not to say this is the whole thing by any stretch.
And I did just want to mention the electric sector modernization plan. By 2050, we anticipate a 2 to 3 time increase in the electrification, electricity use. So, Hector's team and our Eversource team to try and calculate for that. And we do have the ESMP, the electric sector modernization plan, available on our website for viewing. So just know that as well.
Kathy, I stepped on your question.
No, I had another question, which is, you mentioned that you're gonna maintain the electricity throughout, so are you gonna build the new alongside the old and then not get rid of the old until the new is entirely finished, or how will you do that?
Hector, go ahead.
Yeah. So right now we do have an existing line. We will basically most of the new line will go along the same route as what it is now. Then once we connect the new line and we have to use it, we turn off the existing line and we leave it. We do leave it there. We remove any liquid, any sort of material inside of it. We do leave the line. We just remove any liquid, but we do fill it with gas after, and which does reduce or eliminates the danger of any liquids coming out and leaking.
And we use the emergency spare.
And correct. And also if the new existing line, we need any more capacity by any chance, we do have that existing line at the moment that we would use as an emergency spare for it.
Okay, so it stays there just in case it was
Just,
ever
yeah,
needed?
correct.
So it would be, sorry, refilled with liquid if it had to be used?
No, it would be filled with gas.
So it can be used either way?
Yeah, but it would just, we remove the liquid, we don't put any more liquid inside of it. We just fill it with gas. And from there, we would use it if we need it as a spare.
It's capped.
Yeah, we seal it and,
Again, stressing it's an emergency spare.
I wonder if you can remind us what happens with regard to the bridge construction along the path of your project?
Yes, so we would, we want to set up a meeting with MassDOT and work with that. And we understand there's some certain construction coming up, and we would work with their timeline, as we do with many other projects, coordinate with multiple agencies.
And we meet monthly with, Shane's here, and we meet with Karis and the DPW team on a monthly basis, both the Eversource gas and electric side. And I think that would probably be where a lot of that detail would be talked about and make sure we coordinate, because I know, speaking to Karis and Shane and others, that, there are a lot of projects currently and in the future, and so we want to coordinate those. As Ian said, that is a DOT bridge, and so we'd have to obviously work with DOT also, plus the town.
Great. So this is a pretty busy route. Can you talk about what commuters will see when they're trying to drive to work and you guys are working on this project?
Yes, so our traffic management plan's by no means set, but we want to keep access to the road open, and we want to start after a certain time to accommodate school schedules. For example, I know we've talked to the town of Dover and Westwood, and they preferred it after 9 a.m. time to get the school buses in and ease that commuter traffic. We would have probably single-lane alternating traffic with police details for each town that it goes through. So Needham on the Needham side, Dover on the Dover side. And so, again, we would just keep that traffic open. We'd also pave as we go, so that would reduce our timeline. So that's kind of what you would see. Again, there's other factors to consider. Part of this is also meeting with, with the hospital down the road, and starting this community engagement to get more details so we can incorporate that into our traffic management plan. But that's just a general sense.
So it
We would
sounds
work
like,
it, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, so it just sounds like ultimately the road will mostly stay open.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
So this is described, I think, as almost a 3-year construction timeline, right? 2.5, 3. How much of that time do you expect to be in Needham versus in the other towns?
Well, Needham is about 2/3 of the route, so I wouldn't know a definite, but when you factor that in, I'd say, think of it as close to 2/3 of the time.
Okay.
And we would work in sections, so
Yes.
it's not like we'd say, okay, here's the route in Needham, and it's, whatever, a mile, we're gonna dig up
Right.
a whole mile. It would go in sections going
Little
to
chunks.
the question.
And as I understand from this map, you're working in a portion of the town that's outside of our commercial business district. So you run, it looks like up to it, but not into it.
Yes,
right?
primarily residential, correct.
Okay. How deep underground are you having to dig to do this work?
It'd be to the existing lines, but Hector,
yeah, it'd be 2 existing lines, but it'd be around 3 to 5 feet.
Around 3 to 5 feet. Okay. And I imagine that your coordination will work carefully as you're doing these chunks with the affected homes
yes,
that are in particular vicinities at particular times.
yes, and we would talk to direct abutters and coordinate on that access. Going into, we would, part of that outreach is going very, way before construction and having these talks. Also figuring out where existing easements are, so that we can just notify those homeowners as well if they have an easement, and just let them know. But again, we would definitely make sure that notification's priority as we do any project.
And you said you would be paving sort of as you went. Is this the kind of deal where you're paving as you went and then you'll be back a year later to make sure that it's actually smooth, or how does that work?
Yeah, so once construction ends, we would have the restoration, and then that would kind of look at the project as a whole and make sure that we make finishing touches on anything that needs it. So we do have that restoration portion near the end of construction where we do review all of the work there.
Once again, we work very closely with the GPW on that. So
Yes.
we would have temporary patching, but then ultimately have the permanent patch for it.
Yes.
Just note, with the closure of Norwood Hospital, it is quite an ambulance route there, so I think that's it will remain closed probably through that whole period, so that's a really important piece. So when the work was done there, I can't remember when it was now,
December.
we kept one lane going in because of the ambulance traffic, and I would expect that that traffic won't have abated.
Absolutely, and during that period, the police chief was, extremely, and the fire chief were both extremely helpful in trying to help us coordinate it, as Ian said earlier, make sure we had the proper details and coordination, and so we actively work with them, and to your question, Kate, we obviously continue to actively work with them, just because of the critical nature of that road.
Just, yeah, go ahead.
To Marianne's questions about going in segments, will neighbors be able to have notification of on what days the segment in front of their house will be?
Yeah, and part of that would be, through our outreach, our goal is to get people enrolled in our newsletter and updates via the hotline so that we can talk about what section's coming up on this week and the next week. That's something that we do pretty closely with direct abutters, and then myself and my outreach team, we would actually go notify, let them know pretty well in advance, but not too far in advance to the point where they would maybe forget about it. So we do coordinate these timelines to make sure that those abutters for that week or that month are notified in a proper fashion.
Because I know, with weather,
Yes.
plans change.
Absolutely.
So will residents receive a notification, or do they have to?
Oh, no,
Call.
yes, so direct abutters, so I actually have an example over there, but we do have think of it as like a postcard, and it has our hotline information and just that we are doing work in this area from this date to this date approximately, and just my contact information for if they have any questions, and if they have any concerns, and if there's anything we need to work on with that, so.
And do you envision this whole construction happening during daylight hours or overnight?
There would be it depends. I mean, night work could be considered, but again, it is residential, so, we want to factor that in, so I would probably say more day at this point. But we'd work with the town on hours and timeline to your preference, so.
Typically, it would be daytime, as Ian said, because it's residential, and commercial areas sometimes, going back to your question, which isn't commercial, but it's easier to work at night in commercial areas, but typically this is a daytime operation.
So I don't know if the noise regulations apply to this.
Only to building permit activity.
And then the question about the liquid, which is interesting. I think my understanding is that over the bridge there in recent past was a leak with the old line. Is that all cleaned up now and there's no concern about that?
Yeah, no, there's no concern about that. That was done.
And even in the future, by leaving it in place, there's no concern?
No, like I said, liquid is taken out. No, there will be no liquid at all anymore. And yeah, there just won't be any liquid.
Thank you.
Which side of the road are you working in? The north, south side, or north?
Depends. So we'd have to do test bidding to confirm the existing route.
Oh, okay.
So, coordinate with other utilities, see preferences as well. So to be determined, but, I can get that information to you.
Okay, well, when yeah. Okay, and are you staying hopefully in the lanes of traffic? You're not going under sidewalks?
Yeah, so usually where the existing rise that hugs the road.
Yeah.
Rather than anything else. So it is more off, but then there are sometimes where it goes over the road.
Okay.
So just know that as well. I'd have to look at the exact route on the computer, and we'd have to do some test bidding confirmation on that as well.
Okay. And can you address any health aspects of this or health concerns?
Hector, is there?
I mean, I would say no. I mean, there's an existing line there today. We're putting another one in.
Existing transmission.
Right, so this is a replacement, and, you know, back to your question earlier, it's, 5 feet under the ground, so we don't see any issue.
Okay. Okay. Anything else?
Is that 5 feet above or below gas lines?
I mean, as Ian said, I mean, it could be next to them, for example, so you're gonna go in then where you have space, you're gonna put the cable in, but as Ian said, it's gonna kind of run the path that already exists there, so, but it could be near gas lines, but I couldn't answer that question specifically.
I was just thinking, sorry.
Oh,
main
sorry.
Gas lines, like the gas lines to people's houses.
I mean, the gas, it will be in the same area, yes, but that's, when you go in and you test pit and you dig safe it and you mark it all out, I mean, then you build, obviously carefully. And, we know how to do that, and our subcontractors, do this all the time, so.
I was going to say, I don't know if we need Shane to give us a cut through of all the things that are, but the answer is they're all down there in the same general area, just stacked one on top of each other. And some are above others, some are below others, sometimes they go up and down, but everybody's got to be careful when they're digging in that area, there's no doubt. Thank you, Shane.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you so much. Good luck.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much.
See you back there when you have something else to report.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Will you let us know when the outreach meetings take place?
Yes, of course, yeah, we would obviously inform you guys first, and then, send it to media, and then do our mailings and
To the
things of that
folks.
nature.
Okay,
But
thank you.
we anticipate one information session for the town, and then an open house, probably here in Needham, since most of the work would be in Needham.
And then as we start doing the newsletter, what we should do is board member on it, so you're seeing
What's going on? Thank
Thanks
you.
so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks so much. Might anyone move the appointment and consent agenda?
Sure.
Thank you.
I know, is anyone here?
So moved.
Second.
All right. So the vote, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. All right. Next on the agenda, a local initiative program proposal. Do we have a Matt Borelli? Perfect.
2 R's, 2 L's.
Nice to see all of you after a long town meeting.
I know. Thank you. So, Matt, is it? Okay. He seeks support for the board filing a local initiative program application for the proposed 6-unit development at 339 Chestnut Street. 2 of the units will be affordable. Will you jump in?
Okay, thank you, Chair Keen and board members. For those who don't know me, I'm Matt Borelli. My company is Needham Enterprises, LLC. I develop commercial and residential units. One such project, I did a LIP in Medfield of 16 units, which was successful. I'm joined today by my attorney, George Junta, and my architect, Scott Melching, and I will turn it over to them briefly. But as was stated, the idea is to have 6 units here on Chestnut Street, across McDonald's, that building. It's currently underutilized, and then to have 2, so 33% of those units will be designated affordable. So with that, I will turn it over to Attorney Junta.
All right, thank you, Matt. George Junta Jr., as you heard, I'm an attorney representing Matt in this. So we have it's an interesting parcel that we're dealing with here. It's a small substandard parcel. It's 6,200 square feet of area and 40 feet of frontage. So it makes it difficult to do too much with the property. But we all know that there's a severe need for housing in town, and Matt has an interest in building residential housing. So the first thing is, what can we do on this site to accommodate that? And unfortunately, under the existing baseline zoning, very little, if anything. Because of the lack of sufficient area and lack of sufficient frontage, there's an open question in the bylaw about redeveloping the property to begin with. But beyond that, the limitations in the bylaw for residential use in the Chestnut Street Business District, where this property is located, make it exceedingly difficult and not really reasonable. So, for example,
The zoning bylaw for the commercial, for the Chestnut Street Business District allows for a maximum of 2.5 stories, which isn't unreasonable, but then it says for residential, you can only occupy the second story and the half story. So you can basically have only 1.5 stories as residential. And that, on this lot, even if you were to work with the existing building, you're very small space, you know, maybe 1 or 2 units tops. So knocking down the building and starting from scratch makes a lot more sense in terms of utilizing the property. But unfortunately, as I indicated, that's tough to do under the existing zoning. So that means we have to look at things outside of the existing zoning. The first thing that might come to mind is the Chestnut Street or the lower Chestnut Street overlay. But unfortunately, to even get into that, you have to have 15,000 square feet of area. At 6,200, we're woefully short of that. So that's off the table. Then you're looking around the bylaw for anything else, and there really isn't anything else. So we're really limited in what we can do. So then we turn to 40B, Chapter 40B development. And that allows the ability to do something that's reasonable, that makes sense, that provides for housing, but doesn't necessarily meet with the baseline zoning. So I think you hear from Mr. Melching about the design. The design actually complies with a number of the existing baseline zoning, but there are a couple of things it doesn't. Most notably, the FAR requirement, floor area ratio requirement, and then also the number of stories and the occupancy. So it's a 3-story building that's proposed with full residential occupancy throughout. So obviously that doesn't meet the 2.5 stories and only a story and a half of residential occupancy. But it does meet the height requirement as far as the foot requirement. The bylaw caps height at 35 feet, and this is actually under 35 feet high. So with that, I'll turn it over to
Okay,
Mr.
just
Melching.
a quick question, because I can almost hear people in town asking this. We just passed the MBTA zoning. Why does this not apply?
Again, because it's a substandard lot. There's a fundamental issue in dealing with this property. I won't go into all the ins and outs, but basically years ago, there was a change made to the zoning bylaw. It appears it was inadvertently changed in a way that made a substantive change when what was on the table was really a procedural change and a numbering change. But as a result of that, there's now an open question about whether or not what you can do for redevelopment on substandard lots in the commercial districts.
Okay. All right, because it wasn't complicated enough.
Yeah. And zoning's never complicated.
Thank you for the very thorough introduction of the bylaw. We've looked at the bylaw together. We've had a number of evenings, a number of meetings trying to put together a proposal for this lot. We've met informally. We've brought some different projects. We feel this one is the most successful. It speaks to a lot of the needs of the area, as well as a building that fits on the lot in a way that is respectful to everything else that's going on in its neighborhood. Now the lot is set back, the proposed structure is set back. We've put the parking in the front of the building. That is a choice simply because the lot is not wide enough to drive past the building in any meaningful way. So the setback of the building is roughly 77 feet off the street. That is slightly closer than the neighboring structures, certainly the Roche Brothers that was just redeveloped, the Salem 5 Bank, which is next door. We are closer to the street. I know that is the intent of the zoning, is to get us closer to the street. I wish I could tell you we're all the way there, but we're not. To accommodate 8 parking spots in the front of the lot, 6 of which are dedicated to the building, 2 of which are visitor parking. That will give us a room for an accessible spot, a van spot in the front. The building is structured so it is a simple stack of 6 units. On the ground floor, we have 2 fully accessible units. One is a 1-bedroom, one is a 2-bedroom. As we go to the second and third floors, we have 2 2-bedroom units on each floor. Those units comprise 2 bedrooms and 2 baths, and they range from 900 to 986 square feet. The basement would be full depth. We would plan that to be a storage opportunity as well as building services. There are laundry services in the building, and they're spread out throughout the building. So there's a laundry room on every floor. Quickly, before I talk about the aesthetics of the project, the interior mechanical nature of this project would speak a lot to your question about the MBTA zoning. The all-electric initiative that is being presented to us, this building would follow and pursue. Being only 6,000 square feet, we would be in the HERS rating kind of energy world. We wouldn't be going passive house or anything terribly crazy. we would be going more like a residential house construction that would meet the current energy codes. As part of that, I've met with the building commissioner, we've looked at it. Certainly all-electric boiler for hot water, future solar roof ready, all the things that the MBTA zoning is hoping that we would do. Speaking quickly on the exterior appearance of the project, we're in a very interesting part of town where there are residential looking structures. Those structures are clad with wood siding, they are residential scale windows, they are a very mix to some of the more brick buildings which are more commercial looking in our downtown. So what we've decided to put forward to you is a mix of siding types. So while we have more of the blocking and massing of a commercial building, we have more of the soft residential features of clapboard, residential scale windows, overhangs at the entries, cornices around the top of the building. And the goal being a 3-color scheme. So while Matt and I have our love for beiges and grays, beiges have won out for this rendering. On the side of the building, the units, just quickly on the 2nd and 3rd floors, you'll see they have Juliet balconies. That's just a nice feature to bring more light into these units. We think the south-facing nature of that side of the project, which would be our left side, will mean these will be really warm, really bright apartments throughout the day. And lastly, the height of the cornice is set into 2 heights. So the gray, the darker beige, well, now you can see which way I leaned in my color discussion. The darker beige is lower and the white kind of top is higher. That is a taller parapet to screen all mechanical equipment. So any future solar, all the condenser units, the units for each apartment will all be screened visually from the street with that parapet. There wouldn't be a secondary structure to screen it. There would be building facade would do the screening. Did I leave anything out, Matt?
No, I think just to add, the size of the units proposed is really workforce housing. So it's going to limit the rent. And of course, rent is driven by, as we know from the MBTA, by market. But the idea here is with the smaller size of the unit, square footage, it's really going to hopefully be marketed to people who work at the hospital, work at McDonald's, in that area where they can just walk to their business. So it's not going to be luxury units where you can command higher prices. The idea is pretty simple but efficient units for people to live in and work in town.
I'm sorry, let me just sort of close the loop. So as indicated in smaller units, I mentioned to start, we're presenting this as a 40B process project. And with that, 6 total units, 2 of the units would be designated as affordable, or 33% of the units. And we're here before you because ultimately, Matt would love your support, sort of no matter how this proceeds. But this can proceed in 2 different ways. One is a so-called friendly 40B project in which it's basically processed like a normal 40B, but with support from the select board. The other way, which is what we'd actually ask you to consider, is through a LIP project, or a local initiative project. And that's more of a cooperative type project. Basically, it's very similar in terms of the practice, but what happens is in a normal project, at the end of the project, monitoring agreement goes in place, and really it's the state that then oversees compliance thereafter. In a LIP project, it's a joint monitoring arrangement between the town and the state, and the town has a hand in future issues and items such as rent increases. So any affordable project, oh, and by the way, I don't think I mentioned, the intention is for this to be a rental project, rental units, so, which is also an added benefit to the town, because then even though Needham is over the percentage, still all 6 units will go into the inventory. So as time goes on and as markets change, as the market changes, as median income increases and rents get adjusted, the project comes in and asks for an increase in rent. Well, the town would have a say in that. Under a standard 40B project, the town would not have a say in that. It would just be the state, and basically it's just you meet the formula and you automatically get the increase. But with a LIP project, the town can actually be more restrictive and ask for proof or justification why increase is warranted. So it does provide for a little bit more local control. And as I said, it's really a cooperative, almost like a joint partnership type of a thing.
Ms. Levy?
Oh, thank you. Just a technical question. I know you said 2 units. The documents you submitted, I think, said 1 unit? Correct, yes. Could you explain that?
Just this was produced before we had that discussion about the affordability.
So it's intended to be 2 units?
It'll be 2 units, yes, correct.
Included one in
Oh,
our
we did, okay,
documents.
yeah, okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yes.
So your letter illustrates all of the benefits to the town that a LIP provides, which is very nice, thank you. But can you explain why you would prefer a LIP?
I think the application going in under a LIP is stronger. You know, I think it shows the joint partnership that you have 2 interested parties instead of just the developer. And although it's nice to get some type of agreement or a vote saying we support this project, I think it's just better and stronger to work with the town and know that, you know, from a policy perspective, they're supporting it and supporting housing. And it just, I think, makes things stronger. And I don't mind the oversight. I'll tell you, in Medfield, the rent went up, I think, 5% from the state for affordables every year. And I'm happy when we went in for that, and they said, you know, I said, I'm not looking to go 5% a year. I think that's too much for people. That's too much of a shock. And that you have to go before them, and it was, I think, 2% increase or whatever. So I'm happy to also work with the town on those rent increases. And I just think it's better to have a joint project from the strength of the select board and the developer.
My understanding is the LIP also provides financial or technical benefit from the state. Is that correct?
There are opportunities from the state, but I would not be participating in that. I have a wonderful relationship with Needham Bank, and sometimes, although you have incentives out there for these types of projects, when you look at like a 6 or 8 unit project, the paperwork, the waiting, the time, the flexibility, to me, it's not worth that. I'd rather just go forward, but you're right. There could be incentives. I haven't really looked at it for this project.
Mr. Chair. So I know you've already answered this, but I guess I'm having trouble getting it into my head. So what you are saying is that due to the small size of this lot, what we passed last night is actually irrelevant,
That's right.
totally irrelevant.
10,000 square foot
Yeah,
lot.
Well,
okay.
and with all due candor, I don't know if I'd say totally irrelevant,
Yeah.
but there is a question for the substandard lots. Again, this has 6,200 square feet of area versus a minimum of 10,000 square feet required. 40 feet of frontage versus 80 feet required. So because the lot doesn't meet the base requirements for the lot, under the constraints of our bylaw, it appears on the surface that you can't do anything other than keep the existing structure. And then with that in mind, even with the MBTA communities, you really can't do too much with it because of its size and configuration and so on.
Just to chime in on that, we're looking at multiple properties in Needham, obviously both ways. I know both proposals last night were passed, but neither one are advantages to Matt on this lot. We'd be asking for similar things if we tried to comply with that, and it didn't have an upside from a building perspective on the lot.
I will just chime in too, that the home committee actually asked the planning board to look at the consequences for smaller parcels, but this parcel is even smaller than what we had requested. So this seems like probably the only way to make this happen.
Could I add something about that? So in the financial feasibility assessment that RKG Associates did, they estimated that this parcel, along with the surrounding parcels, were the highest likelihood to be developed under the neighborhood housing plan. So, I mean, I can go into more detail about that, but they said it is likely to be developed if it could be combined with other parcels
If it
nearby.
could be combined. Yeah,
And-
that's the catch.
Well, yeah, so I guess by doing this, what you're doing is you're carving out that area, preventing the surrounding parcels from getting bigger, because one of the neighboring parcels is also less than 10,000. So this could have an effect of limiting surrounding development around this parcel.
Mr. Chair, if I just may chime in on that, I did approach the abutter to discuss this. He is on board. That's if you're looking at this right to the right of it.
Yeah.
And he has no interest in selling his parcel for development. So, and the one over from that is Costa's, and that's just been condominiumized. So that's going to have multiple owners. So it would be very difficult also with the cost of, I think it would be an exorbitant amount of money with the cost of real estate in this area, and it wouldn't be practical.
Yeah.
But I understand in theory, that might be something, but in this situation, it's not correct.
Well, did
Yes.
you consider asking the planning board for zoning relief? Because I think that's the normal process if zoning doesn't apply.
No, the only way would be a waiver this way through 40B, or to try to get some variance. And George, I think you can speak to that, would be the route for.
Right, right. Really, there'd be, the only two ways to address this via planning board would be, well, actually, really, the only way to address it via planning board would be a zoning change. So we'd have to either ask them to, on their own initiative, put forward a proposed change, or get enough signatures of registered voters to put a citizen's petition on the warrant and then push it that way. And in my experience, that's, even if you have a good reason, that's still, a 50-50 at best. So, and not to mention the time frame, you're looking at, obviously, the May town meeting would be the earliest, and it might not be until May of 2026, because of the time it takes to have informal meetings and then formal meetings and so on and so on. The other mechanism that would be available, just sort of to cover all the bases, would be a variance. But I'm not sure how familiar the board is with the variance process, but I think Needham has granted, my estimation, I think now it's up to about 6 variances in the last 40 years. And all of those are unique. One of them was for the Hamilton House conversion from nursing home to residential. But it's fewer and further between to get a variance in this town because we follow the law.
Yes. Go ahead. No, this is a point about the vagaries of the MBTA law and what builders and developers do, lot to lot.
Yeah, but it does seem to me that this project, the one caveat about the parking being on the street versus in the back, which I understand, does seem to me to be a perfect project to illustrate the spirit, at least, of the MBTA communities law. It's making housing at a very little. And if 2 of these units are affordable, this seems to me to be exactly what we are looking for here. So I think this looks like a terrific opportunity for us and for you.
Thank you.
So I just would have said that I would support doing something like this as a lit project because I do think it's in keeping with the spirit of what we're trying to encourage. And I do think it illustrates the challenge that we've discussed on Chestnut Street. There have been a variety of projects over the years where people have tried to consolidate parcels unsuccessfully. And I think this is another example of looking right, looking left, and coming to the same conclusion after discussion that it wasn't going to happen. So in the spirit of making, lemonade out of lemons, I think this is a benefit to the town to do this. Matt, I would be curious about a couple things. One is, I do worry, of course, you're right on the train line, and the noise protection and things related to that, I hope is well conceived, because certainly we hear from everybody who is on the train line that it's challenging. And we expect the trains, if anything, to become even more frequent over the years, is the expectation these days. And then the other thing that I think about is the streetscape. So the expectation that you have 1 unit or 1 parking space per unit gets you to the 6. I guess I might wonder whether you need 2 additional, or whether there's a way to also think about, I'm going to say, some community space at the street. How do you think about the streetscape being something other than just a parking lot? So I just put that out there as food for thought. I do worry about that as we're trying to start to build a streetscape down that street. What does this mean to immediately have one of the first projects there be a parking lot?
No, that's understandable. I do know from the developments I've done, is parking is always an issue. Sometimes and we all know parking is an issue, but you come in with these projects and people are afraid if they're too small, they're going to start parking on side streets and other streets and overnight parking. So the idea was to be realistic with those 2 spaces to really accommodate if that happens. there's something I might be able to put in the leases about, parking and how the visitor parking's doled out. But I can look at if there's some type of shrubbery or whatever we can do to better hide the parking from the street.
So I think about shrubbery, I also think about, community space, like the swing we have on the, on the common, or is there something that could contribute to community that could be on the street that still could create a sense there? So-
Sure. Thank you for that.
Maybe just to pivot off, Mary Ann said, parking is existing is 1.5, right? We've brought it down to 1, but are we still trapped in our little?
Well, I think that's a lip.
Well,
Is it
once,
lit? Right,
once you,
okay.
right, once you enter the comprehensive permit world, the 40B world, then ostensibly all the rules are pliable. You can push and prod, and really, I mean, the overall guiding principle is reasonableness. And does it make sense to push here, to prod there, and kind of, you want to comply with as much as you can, which I think, this project complies with an awful lot. It's just a couple of things it doesn't. But, so the parking, the 1.5, right, is the standard 1.5 per unit. This doesn't comply with that. It complies with the sort of the more evolved 1 space per unit. So I think that's a reasonable push-pull kind of a thing.
Okay. Ken?
No, I just wanted to say that since town meeting voted last night, even though it doesn't help this project, but town meeting did have that vote last night, I think really sending a clear message that we want to develop housing on Chestnut Street. And so I think this is very much in line with that, and so even though the zoning doesn't help you, I think we know the community is supportive of this, and something we'd like to see happen.
Thank you. And I will say, Mr. Chair, although it doesn't help this project, it gave us guidelines, really, what the town is looking for as far as, 1 space per unit and, other, more workforce housing, things of that nature that, we complied with as best that we could. It's just a smaller parcel. So it was useful understanding what the town was looking for developments.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, one of the things that we heard throughout the MBTA process was that people were afraid of big buildings and unfriendly developments. And so while this doesn't comply with the zoning to the letter, the idea that you can still make something useful out of these smaller parcels, you can still make a neighborhood, you can still make lemonade out of lemons, I think is a really good guide and should be reassuring to the community that it seems like we're getting, with the exception of the building at the front of the lot, it seems like everything that we have asked for in the community process is here, even on a small parcel. So I think that's great.
So I have a different perspective on the messaging in light of last night. So town meeting approved a specific plan, specific dimensional regulations in specific areas, and we had detailed projections on the likelihood of build out in certain areas. This was deemed to be the most likely of any others in this area. Within 24 hours of passing that, it seems really shocking for me for this board to bypass that zoning that was just passed.
So we have lots of different overlays there.
This isn't an overlay. This is
No, I understand that,
bypassing
but I'm
the
just
zoning.
saying, like, we passed an overlay, but there's other zoning schema that layer on there. I mean, he could have, if his parcel had fit, he could have chosen one of those. That's okay.
But we deliberately made choices less than 24 hours ago. We could have lowered the lot size to 5,000 square feet. I mean, we could have made all sorts of choices, but town meeting didn't. And so now what we're doing is we're undoing that. I've been for this parcel. We're making an exception for this particular parcel. And I could understand doing it if, after a certain amount of time, we didn't see any development. We didn't see what we expected. We wanted to encourage more development, but we haven't even given it a shot. We haven't even given it allowed it to develop as we intended it to.
Well, this is an existing mechanism as well. That's something that we have used in other parts of town and at other times.
Have we ever done a lip?
We talked about a lip on Great Plain Ave, but it became a friendly 40B at the time.
We talked about it, the
The
parcel
the
on,
Kendrick might be.
no, on Charles River Street, where we tried to obtain that for the
Foster
unit.
property.
Foster, thank you. Gosh, my memory, and it was only months ago.
I think the Kendrick was.
We were talking about
Different in spirit, but not really in.
My point is that it's not meant to be routine. This isn't a routine mechanism. This is an exception for when the zoning that's in place doesn't work. And we haven't even given it a try. It's been less than 24 hours to see whether it worked.
But it doesn't work for this parcel. You can't force him to buy other people's land.
No. But the modeling we have that was presented to town meeting shows that this parcel is likely to be developed if it were combined. I mean, you just have to give it the market a chance. That was the whole point of
It's
the
private
zoning that was
property.
passed.
We can't force these people to combine.
I'm saying that we are bypassing the zoning that we just passed 24 hours ago.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. I don't agree with it, but I hear what you're saying.
So I'm going to say zoning represents a framework. And there, within zoning, there are a variety of tools, of which a LIP is actually one of the tools that falls within that. I don't view this as an abdication of the zoning. I think we always have known that there are challenges with Chestnut Street, all right? And, well, the map may say this would be an ideal parcel to be redeveloped. Clearly, it is an underused asset, all right? The fact that discussions have been had with other owners, zoning does not mean that the property belongs to us because we created the zoning, so we can make decisions about the property, right? So there are property owners that get to make decisions within the frameworks they have available to them about what can be redeveloped. And this is the project that comes forward, having checked to see if other alternatives could be available, and they were not.
I think this sets a bad precedent, because are we going to now just welcome any LIP from any property owner that doesn't meet the zoning? I think that our job is to plan, and we spent years on this zoning for MBTA communities, put in so much effort, went through projections, presented them to the community, and we're confident in what we thought was going to happen, and now we're changing that. We're completely changing what we presented.
You know, you make an interesting point, but here's a more interesting one. We all were understanding that we were passing opportunities for the market to do something. But right now, we are talking to the market, and it's his property, and he wants to do this. So it's not for us to tell him how to use his land.
But it's not for us to approve it either.
No, because we can only respond to the market. We don't have to tell him what to do. We are only responding to what's in front of us. The understanding with MBTA zoning was that it was always somewhat speculative. We said all these projects are possibly speculative. We are setting parameters, but we are not compelling anything. So I think this is, for those who are opposed to MBTA zoning, they'd be like, see, in this case, it won't work. The 50%, propensity isn't even gonna happen here. So I'm okay with this.
I just feel like you're saying, here's a really good project that represents everything that we've been trying to foster, and we're gonna cut off our nose to spite our face. Because even though there's this good project and it's right here in front of us, it doesn't match the zoning. He's using an approved mechanism to get there, but the neighbor doesn't want to sell, so I just don't understand where that's headed.
Because this is an ad hoc fix, right?
It's not an ad hoc fix, there's a mechanism for this.
No. This is an ad hoc fix in that there's one property owner who wants one development in this one parcel. This is not long-range planning, and our job is to do planning. And that's what the effort that we put in to the zoning.
May I actually?
I disagree. The planning board's job is to do planning. Our job is to oversee exceptions to that schema.
We're the select board, we're the policy board of town. Of course, we're involved in planning.
In this case, this mechanism comes to us, and we get the opportunity to approve or deny it. So clearly, you'll deny it, but I think the mechanism exists. It's not like we're, carving our own path here.
George, your thoughts?
I do have a comment on this point, and this is, I guess, part of the inherent messiness of zoning, right? Zoning and planning, you are always trying to plan for the future, and you're trying to make changes that will affect positive change down the road. As somebody who grew up in Needham, who's been practicing real estate and zoning law in Needham for over 30 years, I have seen multiple large-scale zoning programs that have gone through and changed the zoning, and like one of the most notable to me is everything on the other side of 128. When the mixed-use 128 district and the Highland Avenue district, when that went in, there was all this discussion about how the parcels would all be combined, and we'd see these buildings that were a mix of, first-class office and all sorts of other stuff. It was like 20 years ago, and there's not a single project that has taken advantage of the change in zoning in any meaningful way to express that vision. I've seen it in other changes, the committee gets formed, consultants get hired, go through a whole process. It takes 2 to 3 years, the zoning gets changed, and then nothing happens. And we can say that's sad. It's an unfortunate reality, because what drives the actual change is the economics in the market. And unless and until you have property owners that are willing to and able to either buy parcels, which usually means overpaying the market price, and in Needham, because the land values, it's really difficult to do that, or people who want to sell, and we generally have not seen that. I mean, a lot of the commercial properties in town have been owned by the same families for generations. Yeah, I mean, I can think off the top of my head, like a good chunk of the center area, a good chunk over the other side of 128, that have been owned for like 50+ years by the same family. And unfortunately, unless and until that changes, which I don't think will ever change, because that's just human nature, you can do all the planning and try and do zoning, but you're gonna end up losing projects. And there have been projects that have been lost, because projects come in that meet the spirit, but not the letter of the sort of revised zoning. And I think this is exactly that sort of a project.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I would just say, echoing that I think that the spirit of, and I was not on the home committee, but the spirit of the effort was to encourage more housing of more different types in the town. That was the purpose. And the rules that were developed in order to try to achieve that purpose. And it is very hard, and I am no expert in this, but my understanding is it's very hard to get those things exactly right, where the rules produce what you are hoping that they will produce. And I know in the past, tried sometimes through rules to attract certain things that have not come. So I guess I'm more interested in the spirit and the purpose, and I did see a mandate last night from town meeting to build more housing of different types, and to me, this does fit it. And I guess the other thing I would say is, from a policy standpoint, do we want what's here now, or do we want to have the future project with the 6 units, 2 of which are affordable? For me, what you're proposing is far of more utility to the town.
Yes, Ms.
I'm just going to offer a further thought. I think Josh is asking another question that he hasn't actually framed in quite this way, but it is, if the board were to grant a LIP on this project, are there criteria that the board is using implicitly or not for granting a LIP, and what might those criteria be? For me, as I'm considering this particular project, a big part of it has to do with the spirit, right, of this, where what town meeting said last night is that there is agreement that along Chestnut Street, we would like to see additional housing developed. We're actually hoping that there's some mixed use there, that some of that also comes in along that street, right? But that you have foot traffic, that you have people who could be working in that area, who might be working at the hospital, for example, and are just gonna walk across the street to their job, that type of thing occurring. So it's not a carte blanche for anybody in town to come bring a LIP, right? There were specific places that we identified close to transit that could support this kind of housing. And I particularly appreciate in this, the increased affordability that's coming in this project.
Thank you. All right, some mundane questions. That was a great conversation. But on your schematics, what's the coffin-shaped piece in the parcel? I don't get it. It shows up and then sometimes it doesn't. What is that?
I apologize, which drawing are you looking at?
Let's see, the colored one, it's the coffin shape, so it's the south side. There's a thin double rule. It's sort of the coffin shaped piece right off of the parking lot. Page 6, you see that? Yeah, you're looking at it right there.
This,
No. Down, warmer, yes. To your right, that whole parcel, here.
yeah, why don't you want to circle it? Yeah.
Let's do this analog.
What's that piece? Is that your part? Because it doesn't.
No. This right here, that's just grass, that's the property line there, and
Oh, so that- all
that's
right.
just the property, over the property line.
So just,
Because
You
a
tell- you
survey
talk
was
to it.
provided from the field resources team, and that is a curb line on the adjacent property.
okay, all right,
That's not
because
my
the other, schematics, or just even the Google shots was all like a, perfect rectangle shot. Okay, now it's that.
It is coffin shaped, Mr. Chair, you're correct.
Okay.
No,
It is.
I
Okay,
note-
thank you.
I note that you have a plan for a full depth basement.
Correct.
This, I think, is an area that's seen a lot of flooding. Is that wise?
The reason for the basement is because the site is so tight, there'd be no room for storage for the unit owner. So understanding that, we would have waterproofing of the basement, would have sump pump pits, would have drainage that would be required by engineering for us to put in. So whatever we can do to keep it dry would be the best we could do. But I thought it was more of a necessity for people to have storage for their belongings, especially if they're downsizing from somewhere, and for their bikes to go out.
Or for the boats. Okay, any thought about mixed use on this?
It wouldn't support, economically, it would not work.
Okay, it's too small.
Yeah, it's too small.
Okay.
And you did,
And I'm sorry.
you did try to gain access from the back of the property.
Yes, I did. I spoke to the owner back there, and just, there's a long-term lease of a equipment, and that's not going to be an option.
So you talked about the solar ready, but do you have future plans to add solar?
I think ideally, it would be terrific. I would just have to price it out and see if that was economically feasible, but I'm assuming, and Scott, maybe you can speak to it with the type of roof and the exposure, if it would be a good candidate for that, and if it is, it's something I'd
Right.
strongly consider.
Please, yeah,
Yes.
because there's also, you can do solar canopy now, sort of elevated over in the mechanicals.
Correct.
Given the orientation of this project and the unlikely nature of a taller building arising to the south, this would be a great candidate. And the systems we are discussing to provide individual heat and cooling to these units, you can see take up a very small amount of the roof. So it is an active conversation.
Okay, great, thank you. And then, quick, how do you make, first off, who would handle this process? Would this be the housing trust? Or who would administer questions about rent and stuff like, if we did the lit?
It's still governed by the state agencies and EOHLC,
Yeah,
so.
Which,
They,
what's the mechanism
generally
in town?
speaking, for the last 7 or 8 years, they don't have us do the actual affordability monitoring anymore,
Okay.
but we monitor their monitoring, and they contact us about rent increases and things like that. So
Okay,
we have a community housing specialist, our office handles it, and the EOHLC handles it.
perfect, all right. And then, how do you make your money on this?
That's the best-kept secret. I don't divulge my secrets. I will
Well,
just
as long
say.
as, no, I'm just like, I mean, it sounds great, you're doing workforce housing, affordable housing, how you can realize a profit.
Yes, the idea is to realize a profit, or you hold it for a long-term investment, and eventually, you get money on the marketable units, so that's the idea. But, we talked a bit, I think, once about in this, getting back to the MBTA, not to get on a tangent, but I think hearing from town meeting, they don't want the 2,500 square foot units or 2,000 square foot units. And I think the idea here is the smaller units, and I just think that would be more desirable. And there will be a market for those because you don't really have that in town. So I think there'll be demand, which when you have rent over, no lost rents for a certain period also helps you with your bottom line. But I'm comfortable with the numbers in this project.
What's in the building right now?
2 offices right now. One is,
Are they rented?
they're rented. They're rented through January of 2025. It's a shirt maker and then a not-for-profit.
Okay, and there's no elevator?
There is no elevator.
Okay. All right. Any other thoughts?
Does the design review board review this?
No, this would go right to the ZBA.
Okay, so section 7.7.2.2 does say design review board shall review all applications in the Chestnut Street Business District. So maybe just check on that.
What do you think,
Well,
George?
that would be the normal base zoning, but with the whole idea of the comprehensive permit is the Board of Appeals becomes the one stop for everything. So they review, and sometimes on some projects, they've reached out to other departments to get specific input, but they basically become the deciding authority for everything on the project.
What criteria do they use? Is there
So there is a set of criteria that's established by DHCD, that's a part of the sort of the overall criteria. There's also regulations in place. And generally speaking, I mean, really, if you look at the whole framework, really you boil it down, it's kind of a reasonableness standard overall. And it's a question of does the project make sense? Do the aesthetics make sense? Does it all work? Is it a substantial deviation from the bylaw, or is it as small as reasonably necessary deviation?
Is a white pine in the back coming down? We can save it.
If it's on the lot, it is coming down, and white pine is really, you can talk to Eddie Olson. White pine's probably not the most preferred tree, but there will be landscaping, and wherever I can get nice landscaping, there will be. And that's why we put the little balconies out there and something nice for people to look at. So it'll be aesthetically pleasing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I'll just summarize. I really do think we need to give our new zoning, fresh zoning a chance before we bypass it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'd welcome a motion. No, this isn't a public hearing. No.
Mr. Chair, I move that the board vote to support the local initiative program application for the 6-unit development at 339 Chestnut Street.
Second.
Okay. Discussion? All right, let's have a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right. 4-1.
Thank you.
Thank you very
It's
much.
great seeing all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, thank you. Next up. We have townwide trail signage improvements. We have Dave Harrer and Deb Anderson, Director of Conservation, in the chair.
I think Deb's going to be.
Oh, she's on Zoom, okay.
She's feeling a little under the weather.
All right. Welcome.
Good evening. The project that I'm before you today is something that the Conservation Department and Conservation Commission are developing to submit to the CPA, or the Community Preservation Council, to provide some improvements to signage at the various open spaces within the town of Needham. I think there are like 11 open spaces that we've looked at. 2 of them are much bigger than the others and have a lot of trails, but we try to look at every one of the spaces. And so our concept is to try to improve primarily the wayfinding signage
Okay.
so that people don't get lost. If you've been on the trails lately, you'll see that the signage is really incomplete. It's outdated, it's not consistent. In the presentation that I had sent, there were some examples of that, but there are also a couple entrance signs that we were proposing to replace that would make the area more visible to people driving by, especially Ridge Hill. You drive by Ridge Hill, you can't even see the signs there, and the town forest as well. And also we're looking at providing some new kiosks at some of the spots, because either they don't have kiosks or they're really in bad shape. So what we're looking for from the select board this evening is just your general approval that we go ahead and submit this application.
Okay, thank you. Deb, anything to add?
I'm here. Hi, sorry, I'm missing out on the in-person. So we're also, the Conservation Department is kind of looking to take over the Trail Steward Program and also the oversight of the Trails Committee as part of this initiative. So we are excited about that. As you probably know, Clay Hutchinson from my department left a couple months ago, so he's a big loss. But we are looking to update the job descriptions to add more open space management in the future.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, questions? Mary Ann?
So I'm curious, I was looking at the staff and volunteer involvement and thinking about, the work to actually get these things into position. Things like installing of the kiosks, where does that fit in here?
We're planning to use a contractor to install the signposts and the kiosks.
So that labor is included in the cost estimate by line item for the items?
Right.
Okay, I just wasn't sure where it was.
We may have to make some adjustments to the scope because the pricing we're getting from some of the contractors varies a bit. So we're trying to fine tune that before we finalize the scope. Also, there are some questions that we have for the various property owner, or quote unquote owners that we hope to resolve in a series of meetings. And then finally, the actual location of the signs is important, and we'll hopefully rely on the volunteers to actually locate the signs on the ground, because contractors don't know anything about our trails. And we do have a big list of people who are interested in volunteering. It's just that we haven't been able to kick off this Trail Stewards program. So that's really something I'm really trying to get kick-started with, along with Deb, and we've been talking with the Park and Rec department as well.
And are you expecting to standardize more on some of the design for these trail markers? Because it feels like we're currently all over the map.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the presentation, I provided some examples.
Yeah.
I've been a trail volunteer for the trustees of reservations for the past 5-6 years, and they really have a nice system for signs. And so at this point, I'm proposing that we use the type of material and the general type of sign that they use. It's not very expensive, but it's very sturdy and long-lasting.
We also, now that we do have the Trails Committee has been meeting on and off, where members from the school committee, the select board, the Conservation Commission, and Park and Rec So we're going to be looking for guidance from the Trails Committee as far as the final designs and other kind of particulars for this project.
Thank you. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I would love to hear if you have a real short snippet about the Trail Stewards Program. I know that this was something that a lot of folks in town had participated in, but it maybe stopped when during COVID.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Dave, do you want me to give a little background on that?
Yeah, well, the genesis of the program, I think, goes way back to 2008, I think. The CPC had authorized or funded a townwide trail study master plan, which still exists, and it's a pretty good document. You know, in fact, a lot of the information that we used to develop this plan came from that townwide study. And as Deb mentioned, we had a meeting earlier this year with this Trails Committee, and the CPC had funded some money to hire a consultant to provide some ideas for this. But, you know, I'm just not directly answering your question, but I don't think a consultant or a contractor can really, you know, locate where we need the signs. I think it has to come from people who are using the properties. And, you know, I quite frequently go hiking around town, and so I have a pretty good idea of what's going on. But I know a lot of the people who have expressed interest in this, you know, being a steward, also have good ideas too. And so the Park and Rec and Conservation departments had put together a program for trail stewards. And I can't remember when it was last in place, but it just kind of fell by the wayside. I don't think it was anybody's fault, but I just, you know, think there was too many other things going on. So they have a brochure, they have a handbook, and basically this year we were going to kick it off. But again, certain things happened and it didn't happen. So hope that this gets kicked off by the spring, early spring, so that we can get started. Because this project that we're proposing, you know, really depends a lot on volunteer input.
Mr. Chair, I would move that the board's vote to support the submission of a Community Preservation Committee application for the townwide trail signage improvement project.
Second.
Any more discussion?
You're on the CPC, right? So it'll be a quick submission.
You know, I'll advocate for it, certainly.
No, this sounds like a great project. It's long overdue. It needs to be done. As the casual observer, I go on these trails and I don't understand them, except for like the birdhouse trail marker. That's a good one. But yay, wish you luck. All right, anything else? Let's have a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Good luck.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Debbie.
Happy trails.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deb.
Yeah.
All right, next up, zero emissions vehicle first policy. With Gabby Queenan and Karis. Oh, shoot, Mark. Playing the part, Karis. Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Hello, select board members. I'm here this evening to talk a little bit about a draft zero emission vehicle first policy. I did prepare some slides. I will try to go through them briefly in the interest of respecting everyone's time. But just to make sure we're all using the same terminology and using the same language. So just to provide some context, next slide, please. So the fleet policy that we currently have in place, as many of you may recall, in 2020, Needham was designated a green community. I'd like to recognize Cecilia for her huge efforts as part of that designation. And in order to be designated a green community, we had to put in place a fuel-efficient vehicle policy. So that was adopted by the select board and the school committee in 2019. I've got a list on the screen of what those exemptions are, as well as requirements for vehicle replacements between departments. So that's just to give you some context for what's in place currently. Next slide, please. So why are we discussing an update to existing policy? Well, a big driving factor of that is that now the state has created the Climate Leader Communities Program, which is kind of seen as the next version of green communities, with more of a focus on electrification versus energy efficiency, which is really where green communities is geared right now. Similar to green communities, one of the benefits of being designated a Climate Leader community is eligibility for their competitive grant program. And for Climate Leader communities, the state has said that they will estimate grants around $500,000 to $1 million per municipality, which is substantially more than the green communities right now. So that would be a nice benefit. I've just listed some of the examples of some of the different projects that grant funding could support, but things like geothermal, on-site solar PV, things like that, which are big projects that would benefit from outside funding. So in order to be eligible for this designation from the state, there are 6 criteria. We are in great shape already in Needham. We've already met 4 of those criteria. Those are the ones listed in green on the screen. We're in the process of working on number 5, which is the creation of municipal decarbonization roadmaps for our municipal buildings. We received a grant to fund that work earlier this spring, and those are expected in the next week or so, so very soon. But the 6th criteria is the adoption of a zero-emission first vehicle policy, and so that's why we're discussing this evening. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to do a very brief overview of some electric vehicles background, again, primarily just so we're all using the same terminology. Next slide. Thanks. When we're talking about EVs, there's a lot of different acronyms that are thrown around. When we're talking about true EVs or BEVs, battery electric vehicles, those are the vehicles that are being plugged in for those energy storage devices. We also have fuel cell electric vehicles, or FCEVs. Those are our hydrogen vehicles. We have plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, or PHEVs. Those are vehicles that can be recharged with electricity, but also have the capability to run on another fuel. And then when we talk about ZEVs, or zero-emission electric vehicles, in the context of this policy, the state is including battery electric vehicles, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, and fuel cell electric vehicles. Not everyone views plug-in hybrids as being zero-emission electric vehicles, but in the context of DOER, they do, and so that's why they're included within this definition. And then the last one is just hybrid electric vehicles, so are vehicles that are powered through an internal combustion engine and then also have a small electric motor for energy storage as well.
Those included as well.
So hybrid electric vehicles are not considered zero-emission electric vehicles, but I've just included them because we already have some hybrid electric vehicles, and they're part of the mix right now.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. Next slide, please. Thank you. So one of the questions that often comes up with electric vehicles is cost to fuel. So this is just a breakdown which shows you annual fuel cost ranges, and this is just for light-duty vehicles. That's because the emphasis of this policy is on light duty. I'll also note that this is for model year 2021, and this is based on a national data set. As we all know, in New England, in particular in Massachusetts, we do have higher electricity prices. So we're more on the upper end of that battery electric vehicle side when we look at fuel costs, but relative to gasoline, the savings for electric are still very significant when you think about fuel cost ranges at an annual basis. Next slide, thanks. Another factor that's important to consider with electric vehicle costs is also maintenance. So this is a chart just showing a breakdown of maintenance costs for light-duty battery electric vehicles compared to plug-in hybrids, and then internal combustion engines or ICE vehicles. Battery electric vehicles, again, perform really well when you look at it from a maintenance perspective. On average, 6 cents per mile compared to 10 cents per mile for an ICE vehicle. And part of that is just a difference in terms of equipment. Battery electric vehicles don't have to have oil replacements. They benefit from regenerative braking, so those brakes aren't seeing the same kind of wear that you are in an ICE vehicle. So all of those costs add up as well. Next slide, please. And then incentives. This is another important factor to consider when looking at upfront costs. So there are several incentive programs that we're able to take advantage of in Massachusetts. I've bolded and underlined the first federal incentive because this is one that can be stacked with state incentives, and that's our elective pay or clean energy tax credits. So this is $7,500 for battery electric vehicles, $7,000 for plug-in hybrids, and for any medium or heavy duty, $40,000. And then there's also the state Mass EVIP program. Just got a breakdown on the screen for you of what those grants would be for each vehicle. State, we also have the More EV pickups in Class 2B. And then in addition to that, there's the More EV Class 3 through 8, which is for our medium and heavy duty vehicles. So I've just listed that breakdown as well, so you can see where some of those incentives work out.
Does somebody stack on each other?
Yes, good question. So for the state programs, you're not able to stack those incentives. So you're usually very strategic about, given the weight and the class of the vehicle, which incentives you would pursue. But the nice thing is that the federal ones do stack. So whichever state incentive we'd apply for, we would also want to apply for the federal option as well.
Do these have any expiration?
The state programs right now are open, and there's been no notice of those programs closing anytime soon. Federal, those programs are good for 10 years. That's good. Yeah, good question. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is just an example of some cost comparisons. Again, these are light duty vehicles that I've pulled just because, again, the emphasis of this policy is on light duty. But this is just to give you a little bit of a comparison. The first example is a Toyota RAV4 hybrid versus a plug-in hybrid. And we do have this vehicle currently. So you can see, in this case, it's a vehicle that would qualify for Mass EVIP. It's under 8,500 pounds. So we'd look at the $7,000 benefit for elective pay. So that total after those incentives is actually less than what we would pay for the hybrid. And this is just going off of MSRP prices. And then another example for the Ford F-150, that's the XLT comparison versus the Ford F-150 Lightning, which is an all-electric pickup. With the More EV pickup and elective pay, the total after incentives is still a little bit more than we'd be getting from the gas model, but the costs are a lot more competitive. Next slide, please. A concern that we often hear with electric vehicles is reliability in cold conditions. It's important to note that, yes, EVs do lose range in cold conditions. The reason why is that those liquid electrolytes inside of those lithium batteries are not moving as quickly as they typically would when we're in freezing conditions. And so the range from those vehicles is reduced. It's hard to give you an exact number for what a range reduction would be. On average, most vehicles that are light duty, we're seeing a 3 to 33% range, but again, that will vary based on driving conditions, weight of the vehicle, if there's additional equipment in a vehicle, how the driver is driving, traffic, things like that. So I've just listed an example on here from the Ford F-150 Lightning. This is from the El Prix, which is an event that the Norwegian Auto Federation runs, where they basically take a large group of electric vehicles, bring them up into the mountains, and then basically drive them until they stop to see how they perform in the cold.
And walk home?
Yeah, well, they're organized enough to have someone pick them up. But this is just an example for the F-150 Lightning. It's a vehicle that's become very popular. And as you can see, there was a drop of about 21% when you compare advertised range versus range in, I believe it was 10 degrees was the day that this vehicle was driving. So it is a drop. Things that are important to consider with that are making sure that you're selecting models that have an added range, doing things like preheating of the vehicle when it's already plugged in. Heated seats and steering wheels are also a nice option because compared to heating the cabin, that's going to be a lower energy usage. And then also making sure that things like air pressure in the tires to make sure that those vehicles are being used to their max capacity. Yeah, next slide, please. Battery concerns is another common issue that we hear with EVs. It's important to note that battery warranties right now are about 7 to 10 years, which is actually in line with what we typically see for our vehicle replacements. So that's about 100,000 miles. So when those warranties expire, most EV providers will actually take the batteries back, and then they'll use them again for a second or third time, usually not in a vehicle, but used for some other purpose, like powering a backup fridge, things like that, kinds of uses, but not for another vehicle. And the battery recycling industry is growing. There's a lot of state and federal momentum around this issue. So there's expected to be large growth in the recycling industries, particularly for batteries. Next slide. Thanks. Grid concerns. This is another common issue that we hear is, can the grid even support all of these EVs? The short answer is yes. The longer answer is that capacity is needed to grow. And we got to hear a little bit about Eversource and some of their upgrades with transmission earlier. But there's going to be a lot of planning required to make sure that there's improvements to the grid to keep pace with electrification. So whether that's upgrading feeders, vehicle to grid program growth, things like that that make our grid more resilient. Next slide. And then this is just a breakdown of EVs in comparison to carbon dioxide emissions. This is showing grams of CO2 emissions per mile in New England. Similar to what we saw before. Battery electric vehicles compare really well when you look at things like diesel and gas, and batteries that are being charged with 100% renewable energy are, of course, performing the best when you look at carbon dioxide emissions. Next slide. So where are we with EVs in Needham currently? So we currently have 6 all-electric vehicles. That's 4 Chevy Bolts. The building department is using those, and 2 Ford E-Transits that are being used by the building maintenance division. Those are charging on average once or twice a week. We also have 1 RAV4 plug-in hybrid that's being used by building maintenance, and that's charging about 3 to 4 times a week. The range is a lot smaller for those plug-in hybrids compared to the all-electric vehicles.
Mr. Chair, can I ask
Yeah.
the existing
Oh,
vehicles?
sure.
Are they like the first line cars that we use, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, those vehicles are used every day. Yeah.
There's no like preference that people in the departments have?
Chevy Bolts are the Chevy Bolts are their building department, so it's all the inspectors. They're using those to go out and do their inspections each day. The 2 transit vans that we have are the building maintenance. One of them is Sean Rico, the electrician, has that one. So he's at most town buildings each day doing the electric that we need here. And then Barry DeLong, as our building maintenance manager, has the plug-in hybrid, and he uses that, and that's mainly just people moving back and to and from meetings, to and from site visits for all the maintenance activities. So they're being used every day.
And then in terms of charging infrastructure, because this is another concern if we have electric vehicles, what about the chargers? So there's 3 levels of electric vehicle chargers. Level 1 is your classic 120 volt. That's what you would have at home. This is a level that you would really only see in a home instance. We're not installing level 1 chargers in town. In 1 hour, you're seeing on average about 4 to 7 miles, and that's just for a light-duty vehicle. Level 2s, these are the chargers that we currently have in Needham that are run by the town. So those could be installed at home for fleet charging or public charging. Those are the 240 volts. In 1 hour, you're seeing about 15 to 35 miles for a light-duty vehicle. And then level 3s, or DC fast chargers or DCFCs, those are 480 volts. Those would be used for fleet or public. You're really not going to see those in someone's home. And in 30 minutes, you're getting about 100 miles of charge for a light-duty vehicle. In terms of fleet charging right now, I mentioned that we have level 2 chargers that are run by the town right now. This is just a breakdown of public chargers and then fleet-only charging. The chargers that I've listed in black are ones that are currently operating. Green are in the process of being installed. So we have 2 ports going in at daily for those 40 transits we were just talking about before for building maintenance division. And then the locations that are listed in red are locations that we've identified for future chargers, where we've had interest expressed by residents or by folks who work in that building that think they could use a charger over there, and there's strong potential that their vehicles could be replaced with EVs in the near future. I'll just mention that Newman is listed on here for 2 ports for level 3, and that's because we're working towards getting an electric bus. And so the hope is that those chargers will be installed for that future electric bus. The May town meeting approved $800,000 for that EV charging, and we're in the process of working through some price proposals as we look at moving forward with that project.
Is there any sense to sort of upgrade to level 3 for the DPW garage, Emery Grove? I mean, or is that overkill?
For the near term?
Yeah. Or
That's a good question. I mean, I think we would want to prioritize level 3s where we expect to have EVs that are medium or heavy duty. That's where we want to prioritize. So we've talked about the potential for some of the vehicles that are at RTS to eventually transition. There's been really positive movement with refuse trucks in particular, and those are big vehicles, but those really need a level 3. So I think that's kind of the determining factor that we use. If there was a medium heavy duty vehicle that we felt could be charged over there, we'd look at doing a level 3.
There are some good reasons not to use a level 3 on every kind of car, though.
Yes, yeah, they do wear the battery more quickly. So you wouldn't want to charge on level 3 every day if you're a light duty vehicle, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Next slide. Thank you. So again, I want to recognize Cecilia, who had the wonderful forethought to get a grant for us to get a fleet electrification roadmap. So this work was completed at the very beginning of this calendar year with Power Options. So we developed a roadmap for all of our fleet vehicles, looking at getting to 2050, which is our net zero goal with our climate action roadmap. How are we going to get there, and which vehicles would we look at transitioning? But a key part of that roadmap was also, what are we going to need in terms of chargers for our fleet? So this is a breakdown of buildings and number of vehicles, and then number of level 2 chargers and number of DCFC chargers or level 3 chargers. So this is, again, numbers by 2050 that we would like to have at those locations to ensure that we can do a successful transition of our fleet to electric. Next slide. So the policy, next slide again, thank you. There are several other Massachusetts municipalities that have zero emission vehicle first policies in place. I've just listed some on the screen, but more are being added, it seems like every day. And again, a big driving factor is the Climate Leaders Program. The first round for designation ends December 31st, 2024. So that's a compelling reason why a lot of communities are trying to jump on this quickly. Next
Gabby,
slide.
when do you have to get an application in for that?
So for the the grant program will not be open until they've done their first round of designations. So you would need to submit all designation materials by December 31st.
And are you expecting, I know this is before us now for some action, there was also the roadmap.
Yes. So we should be getting the draft roadmap next week, and we'll do some edits, and then that will also have to go before the select board and the school committee for approval before that can be finalized.
Great, thank you.
And these are just some photos of EVs in other communities, just to show you the nice variety that we're seeing across the state. Next slide. So in terms of the actual policy, so this was drafted based on the model that's provided by DOER. examples from other communities, and then what I should have also listed on there is a lot of conversations with other department heads about preferences, concerns, new ideas. So the key aspects of the roadmap are really vehicle procurement prioritization. So what we're really saying with this policy is that when a vehicle comes up for replacement, we would first consider a battery electric vehicle or a fuel cell electric vehicle. If that was not a feasible option based on price, availability, ability to meet the operational needs of that vehicle, we would next look at a plug-in hybrid, and if that didn't work, then a hybrid, and if that doesn't work, then we go to the most fuel-efficient option. And there are a few exemptions that we've listed in this policy: any vehicle with emergency response capabilities, any vehicle required for use in the snow and ice program, and then heavy-duty vehicles and off-road vehicles. And that is the last slide. I'm happy to take any questions on those last slides.
Thank you. That was great. Discussion? Yeah, Ms. Duff.
I feel like I'm back at school. Mr. Chair, I'm wondering, how much flexibility does a town have to craft this policy, or is it pretty much the state says, here's the policy, adopt it if you want to be part of this?
So DOER does provide model language that you are encouraged to include. I have shared the draft that was included in your agenda packet with DOER to see if some of the changes we made would pass their sniff test, and they approved. For example, we've specifically exempted vehicles in the snow and ice program. That's something that I actually haven't seen in other policies, but it's kind of assumed because heavy-duty vehicles are exempt. But things like that are different for our draft. But we are encouraged to adhere as much as possible to the model language.
And then I had a follow-up question, and you mentioned the batteries are warranted for 7 to 10 years. So would the idea be to keep the vehicles past that point, to replace them? And once the batteries are out of warranty, is there much trade-in value for these vehicles at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's an area that we've discussed what the impacts might be for resale value. I think we would have to look at options with our vehicle providers in terms of what they would see for buyback. We're in an interesting position right now because the battery recycling industry is catching up pretty quickly, but the value isn't quite the same as what you'd expect for a resale of a gas vehicle. So the hope is that we'll see some movement there, but there could be implications for that as well.
Mr. Chair, a follow-up. So that's 7 to 10 years. How does that compare to the current replacement cycle?
Yeah, it's a great question. It lines up actually very well with our current replacement schedule. Most vehicles we're replacing right now about 7 to 10 years.
So in the example that you showed us that listed the MSRP of the car with the available incentives, the second example of the truck, it looked like the electric truck was a little bit more expensive in the initial purchase price. So are you evaluating the whole picture, like the fuel cost and the maintenance costs and whatever else is involved in that big picture? I mean, we're not going to lose out on an EV just because it's like $1,000 more.
Yeah, I think that's a great point in looking at really life cycle costs for these vehicles, which is a little bit of a change of perspective. But one of our strongest advocates for our EVs has been our fleet supervisor, who's been able to point from experience to some of the benefits in terms of maintenance savings on EVs. So it makes a really compelling case when you look at all aspects of the cost. So that's the goal, is that with this policy, we'd be really looking at the full picture for the vehicle costs.
And totally unrelated to anything, I would just like to say that my son, who is graduating from Northeastern, just got a job with a battery recycler.
Oh,
First job
congratulations.
ever, so it's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, you'll get all the inside scoop.
Right, you must be so charged up.
Oh, it's terrible. It's a good thing he doesn't watch these meetings. He'd be.
Shane, how does DPW DPW feel?
So we're in line with this. One thing I made a note of is, even though our heavy duties are exempt from this, it doesn't mean that we're taking this blanket statement to say we're not going to look at alternative fuel sources for our heavy-duty vehicles. As Gabby mentioned earlier, one of the things we're already looking at is an electric packer for the town-wide pickup that we're doing. And then also the street sweepers are now becoming electric. So those are two options that we're looking at now that would fall into heavy-duty classes that we're looking at for the electric as well. So we're not taking this blanket statement of we're just going to use gas or diesel vehicles. We're looking for these alternatives when we can. Even in the snow and ice market, as you know, I go to these snow and ice conferences, and the technology is really coming along with the electrification and electric, but we're just not quite there yet. But as we get closer to that, as we see more infrastructure come in with the chargers, and as the vehicles start to prove themselves out that they can be used in continuous snow and ice operations, we would be looking to convert over to those when and where possible as well. So we're not taking a blanket statement if we're never going to do it. We're looking at phasing them in where we can and where it's appropriate.
For the new DPW facilities that are being, designed and built, where's Fleet staying, and do they now have to be, should they be heated? Garages for cold winter nights.
So the fleet is going, as you know, to Cogswell as part of the phase one. So it is important to note that some of these chargers we're making sure that as we're looking at the design for these different phases, that we're including the electric vehicle chargers as part of that. It's just a natural progression to include that as part of these design processes and then the build as well. Phase three in the program would be where the current 470 comes down, and then we build a new storage facility there for our vehicles. At that time, we would look at some heat, but it wouldn't need to be to the degree that it is now, because it's simply you're putting the vehicle in there, and then of course that would have several chargers depending on the electric vehicles that we have at that time.
Thank you. Any other questions?
One more question. So in the event of like a power outage, I know we don't get storms all that often anymore, but is there a backup plan?
Yeah. Yep, that's a good question. So part of our planning with EV charger locations is thinking about strategic locations. We had on December 18th, which was my first day here, we had a major storm event, which many of you may recall. And on that day, we did lose power at PSAB, and we actually lost power at the chargers. And we already had our 4 Chevy Bolts at that time. But an important thing to remember about EVs is that, especially a battery electric vehicle, is that they, at this point, generally all have over 200 miles of range. So even though we didn't have power at PSAB for at least for the chargers, for I think it was 3 days, we actually didn't have a single issue with our building department. They were able to use those vehicles without any concerns. So it's something to think about for sure as we think about resiliency for the grid, and it's another driving reason why we want to think about options to diversify our grid. But I think with the range piece as well, and knowing that we would prioritize models that have an extended range, we would feel comfortable with that.
I think the second piece of that as well is strategic locations of where the chargers are throughout town, because if we did have an outage at one portion of the town, doesn't mean we're dead in the water for charging. We could just move those vehicles to where we do have active electric and plug them in and charge them at those locations as well.
What's the impact on our climate goals overall?
And on the municipal side, in terms of our emissions, it's a good question. I would have to look to see what the breakdown is for vehicles in particular. I know that 3% of our emissions are attributed to our municipal operations, but that includes vehicles and buildings. So I'd have to get back to you on that question for vehicles specifically.
That's small, it sounds like.
Relative to the whole pie in Needham, it is small.
And are we looking at or thinking about battery backup, solar to battery?
Yes, that's a hot topic. We've talked about it, at least at a concept level, for Cogswell. We'll see how that progresses, but that's definitely a priority, especially as we were discussing earlier, now that we have solar canopy. as an option in Needham. That's something we're thinking about, is opportunities to include solar and storage, and to benefit both for those buildings and especially if we're doing charging, and we want to have that resiliency component too. So yes, definitely top of the mind.
This is great. Thank you so much. Is it yes? Go for it, yeah. We're not voting on this today, right?
Not
We're
anything
just-
today. Yes.
I'm excited.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
moving
you.
this forward.
Gabby's not leaving.
Stay here.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
You stay. All right. Next on the agenda is Needham Power Choice Program update. We have Gabby here. We have Dave Davison here and Cecilia Sinchak. Thank you. Hello. Back again. All right. So this is the Needham Power Choice Municipal Energy Aggregation Program.
Yes, still me. So we do have some slides, a smaller number of slides that we will go through very briefly. The goal is really just to kind of provide a brief status update for the program, just to give folks a sense of where we're at currently. We go to the next slide. Okay, okay, thank you. So we're gonna talk about background actions that were taken to bring us to where we are today, and then a tentative program launch schedule, assuming everything works perfectly, and then finally key program decisions, and then we'll continue that conversation a little bit later. So if we go to the next slide. Thank you. So just for a little bit of background for folks who maybe are watching at home. So Needham Power Choice is our municipal electricity aggregation program, which is a form of group buying for electricity, where the municipality is securing its electricity supply for residents and businesses. So in Needham right now, Eversource is both our distributor, so getting the electricity to homes and businesses, and our supplier. So what changes in this situation is that we keep Eversource as the distributor, but our supplier is changing. More than 200 Massachusetts communities have approved these aggregation programs. We've got some great examples of communities around us. And the goals of our program are to provide cleaner electricity for residents and businesses, creating new electricity choices, and then providing stable and competitive electricity prices as well. It's important to note that savings for the Eversource basic service price compared to this program cannot be guaranteed, but in general, prices have usually been favorable with the aggregation programs. Next slide, please. So with Needham Power Choice, residents and businesses would be given 3 options from our one electricity supplier. Needham Standard would be the default option for where customers are going to be enrolled unless they choose to be in one of these other options, or they could choose to entirely opt out of the program. Needham 100% Green would be 100% from renewable sources, and then Needham Basic would include the minimum required amount of renewable energy as required by the state. Next slide, please. So actions to date. In October 2022, town meeting voted to authorize the town to pursue municipal aggregation. The town then developed a municipal aggregation plan and presented a draft to the public at a select board meeting in December 2023. Then in February 2024, we filed our plan with the State Department of Public Utilities. And then just a few months ago in August, the DPU approved our plan. And so now we are in the process of preparing for a program launch. So this slide shows best case scenario, our schedule in terms of a program launch. So recently staff met with our wonderful consulting team from Mass Power Choice to review indicative bids from electricity suppliers. That was September. In December, we will do a final bid meeting, and assuming that the bids are favorable and we like the options that are proposed, we would move forward with signing a supply contract. We'll then move into the public education period. So end of December, a coming soon postcard will be mailed to all residents and businesses, informing them about this update. An opt-out notice will go out in the very beginning of January, letting folks know that if they do not want to participate in the program, they do have to opt out. Public information sessions and other outreach will take place during that whole month of January, and then the opt-out deadline would be set for early February. So again, assuming everything goes perfectly to plan, we would be launching the program on March 1 of 2025.
How does this affect residents who already have a private electric supply contract?
So they would have the option to join this program, but they would not be automatically opted in, as would customers who are on Eversource Basic Service. But they'll still get this notice, so they'll get all the information. They could still decide, these rates are more favorable, maybe I want to go this option, but they would not be automatically pulled in. So key program decisions. So when we are evaluating price bids, we'll be thinking about the price, the supplier, and their contracts, the term length. Another important factor will be, in particular for Needham Standard, the amount of additional renewable electricity over and above state requirements, and then also how we want to get to that 100% green for the 100% green option. And final decisions for that will be made the day that bids are received. So that's that final bid day that we mentioned earlier.
December 3rd.
December 3rd. Yep.
So that's not something that comes to us. That's a decision that the team makes with the criteria that we decide on.
That's correct. Next slide. Oh, thank you. So in terms of the amount of renewables in the Needham Standard option, so because renewable electricity increases the price, the town will have to decide how we want to balance those options between cost and our renewable energy priorities as a community. So the goal is to add more renewable energy, but we want to also try to keep the price hopefully below where Eversource's basic service price is currently. So based on the indicative prices, it's possible we could be adding up to 30% additional renewable electricity and still be below the pricing, but that will have to be determined by indicative prices.
So 30% above the baseline.
30% above the minimum that's required by the state.
What is that?
27% for Class 1 RECs. Yeah. For the amount of additional renewable electricity, that does tend to vary by community, but most are adding between 10 to 20%. If you go to the next slide, there's a wonderful graph which shows the percentage ranges for different communities, and this is additional mass Class 1 RECs or renewable energy certificates by community. So you can see Newton all the way over at the end with nearly 70%, all the way down to 1% with Cape Light. Next slide, please. So this is the confusing slide, which Paul might jump in on, but there's
Gabby, can I just ask a question about we don't see like Wellesley on this bar chart slide, right? I figured there's a reason why we don't see them.
Yes, they have their own municipal electric department, so they don't have a program like this. They have a different thing, which is similar in some ways, but it's not this exact thing.
I was going to say, I know they still have something, so, okay.
So in terms of 100% green, so this is one of our options, one of our 3 options with the program. So there's different ways you can get there. One avenue would be pursuing mass Class 1 RECs, again, the renewable energy certificates. Like Josh was asking earlier, the minimum that's required by the state right now for mass Class 1 RECs is 27%. There's an option to add additional Class 1 RECs, and if we wanted to go the route of having 100% mass Class 1 RECs, we would add 63%, so that'd be our voluntary column. However, in Massachusetts, state law requires that suppliers have to purchase RECs from other sources in addition to those Class 1 RECs, including sources that are not new but clean, such as waste energy, or they're clean but not renewable, such as nuclear. So there's another 36% that's coming into the equation from those other recs. Those are not Mass Class 1 recs. So for that reason, if we went the route of going 100% Mass Class 1 recs, we would end up with a total recs of 136%. You might be asking, what's the difference between Mass Class 1 recs and these other sources of energy? Mass Class 1 recs are really set to a higher standard in terms of issues like sustainability and environmental standards. A really great example of that is hydropower. Mass Class 1 recs have to meet Low Impact Hydropower Institute or LEHI certification, which means that they meet certain criteria for fish passage for hydropower. They meet criteria for community engagement. They meet criteria for flow, things like that. So the Mass Class 1 recs are greener when we think about truly sustainable sources of energy that are meeting high environmental standards.
Gabby, I don't understand how you can get above 100%. I'm completely lost.
Why wouldn't we just, in the voluntary
because they
line, why
require you
wouldn't
to
we make it
purchase more, so the
37%
cost is
instead of
higher.
63%?
At least that was my understanding.
But I mean,
Hold on one second.
how do you get above 100%?
Yeah, you're gonna have to.
Yes, so that's a great question, and that's exactly why a lot of communities go with the column on the right, because how could you have over 100%? So I will say as an aside, that athletes have been giving 110% for years, so it is a concept that exists in society. But the way it actually works is there's your electricity supply, and then suppliers have to buy these renewable energy certificates. They can buy the amount that matches your electricity supply exactly, so that would be 100%, or they can buy extra ones if they want. So the conceptual framework for the column on the left is, we're going to buy only the good ones, and we're going to count those to 100. State law requires that we buy these other ones too, and we're going to comply with the law, but when we say 100, we're meaning 100% good ones.
So it's going to be more expensive because you're buying a bunch of stuff you're not using?
You're buying a bunch of extra stuff, that's correct, so that's exactly right. It's more expensive to go the column on the left is more expensive, but more environmental. The column on the right is a little less expensive, a little less environmental, but for some people less confusing. So that's the trade-off. And different communities fall on both sides of this equation, which is why we
So does
talk
the
about
extra 36% just go to waste, or is it used for something else?
Well, it still counts, so it's still purchased, nobody else can purchase it, so yeah, it's still there. It's like, I can't really think of an analogy for it because it is weird, but yes, it still counts, it's just more than 100.
Or maybe another way of asking, who's the beneficiary of that extra money that's being spent?
The people who own those renewable energy projects. So the state requires, for example, that in that extra 36%, it includes some nuclear, for example. They have to buy some nuclear. So the people who own the nuclear power plants get the benefit of people buying those RECs. So they still benefit, but there's some customers who say, well, we want our town's 100% product not to include any nuclear in it. And we don't want any of those big hydro projects that aren't so good for the environment. And we really don't want any waste to energy in there because that's required, but it's actually really dirty. So we want a more pristine 100.
And so,
But isn't pragmatically, part of that effect is to increase the cost to the town as well, because you bought 100% of clean plus additional ones. So that's why it's showing the higher cost per kilowatt hour.
That's correct. So forgive me for talking so much. So the residents who choose this option, it would be a little bit more. It is a voluntary option, so it's only for people who made the decision to buy it. People don't have to buy it. And I'll say from my experience with other communities, and communities do go in both directions on this, but the people who choose the 100% option tend not to be all that price sensitive. So they want the greener one. So you're probably not going to get fewer people choosing it because it costs a little more, because it still costs more than the regular. So they're buying the extra, and if extra is a little bit more extra, that doesn't seem to have an impact.
And so this is either or.
Correct.
You can't offer both options.
Well, that would be, I would recommend against that. It would be super duper confusing to offer both. And also, because this is complicated anyway, programs tend to work better if you have a limited number of choices, not a lot of choices. So the way the town has proposed it, there are 3 choices. So like there's the middle, there's the cheap one, and then there's a super expensive one. That's easy to get your head around, small, medium, large. Adding extra ones would make it more complicated.
And is there some extent to which we can fine tune which of the ad recs we choose to buy? Like, for example, if we decided that we wanted, of the ones that we have to buy in either plan, if we chose 100% nuclear over 100% or some portion of waste, is that doable thing, or that's not a fine tune that we should do?
Sadly not, because that 36% are the required ones, and so the supplier is going to meet those requirements, whoever they have to meet them, and the town can't influence those. It can only influence the voluntary ones. And with regard to the voluntary ones, you've got all sorts of ability to influence. You say what you want, and they'll provide it. But the required ones, you can't influence.
Would that be a state level fix? I mean, we're not fixing the 36, but that would have to happen at the state.
Correct.
And typically, what percentage of customers are choosing this 100% green, of whatever flavor it is?
Yeah, so it ranges from, I'd say, 1%. The highest in the state is about 10%.
And what town is that?
Lincoln. And it's both Lincoln really markets it hard. So the residents of Lincoln, who are part of their green committee, really work hard to get their fellow residents to buy it. You have to work really hard to get to 10%.
And do you know which one they have? Do they have this super duper all
They have
mass
they have the
one, or-
super duper one. I mean, they are Lincoln, so yes, they have the super duper.
There is a color called Lincoln Green.
Can I ask basically a repeat of what Heidi asked about the vehicles? Like, how does this impact our climate goals in Needham?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it impacts our goals in the sense that when we do our accounting for things like electric vehicle charging, and we think about where those sources of energy are coming from, it will benefit us in that sense, and that we'll be able to count those emissions as truly zero in terms of carbon dioxide emissions, at least. So it's beneficial to us in that sense. I mean, this ultimately is the biggest impact that we can make when we think about residential, municipal, and commercial in terms of our reduction for our greenhouse gas emissions across the entire community, because every resident, every business will have the opportunity to make this decision across all 3. So we're making it a little bit easier for everyone to make that choice.
And as we move into building with our specialized code, and we're pre-wiring for so many new construction or whatever, so we're sort of setting the stage for a further reduction, because it's so hard to get people to change their gas furnaces and so on.
Yeah, it's one step easier for them, and by giving them these 3 options and setting these percentages for renewable energy, it's one way to make it easier for folks to make that decision.
Okay. And by the way, it's only 6 months waiting for DPU, right? Is that it? February to August, right?
February to August.
Yes, but lightning speed compared to past experience.
Oh, I know,
Oh, yeah,
right?
for sure.
We said maybe 2 years.
Yeah, it's like, wow, okay.
And so what can we expect now for price variability? I mean, I think my understanding of it, and you can correct me, is that once we commit for a period of, 3 years?
It will depend on the term length that we choose
What we
for.
choose.
Yes.
So kind of just depends on what's available at the time on December, whatever it is.
Yes, and we can discuss some actual prices in an executive session, but conceptually, that's exactly how it works. So you'll choose, if you like a bid you get on December 3rd, you'll take a bid. We'll know then what the basic service price is at that time. So you'll know how it compares to the basic service price at the time the program launches, and you'll know whether, lower, how much lower it is. Basic service prices do change in the future. We'll give you our best projection about that, but no one can promise the future, so it could change. It has
Feels a
been
little
the
like gambling.
Well, yeah, I mean, a little bit, or, locking in a mortgage or anything like that. The experience has been of programs like this. UMass did a study. About 85% of them have beaten the basic service price. So they've generally done well compared to basic service.
Do towns generally go out to bid again when the contracts expire?
Yes, in virtually every case, yes. So when we get the town gets towards the end of one contract, they go out to bid again. And the town has the choice again. If you like the prices, you sign another contract and continue. If you don't like the prices, you could end the program at that time.
And would the town Needham jump into this program, or are we on our own? Okay.
What's the schedule for how often the basic price changes? Is there a schedule to that, or is it predictable?
Yes, changes every 6 months on a set schedule.
So if we commit for a 3-year term or a 2-year term, there will be approximately, 2 years, 4 changes in the basic price over that period of time. Could go up, could go down. Okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood. So there's a fixed term or no?
Oh, for
Our term.
Eversource Basic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I misunderstood, okay.
Well, this sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's exciting.
Yep.
Yes.
Stay tuned.
Yes.
What question, does this displace or replace our current contracts, energy contract?
No, it doesn't. The contract that the town has for electricity supply, that expires in December, and we're likely to be going out in the next several weeks for a contract for supply for the town. One of the reasons that we do that is we do secure better pricing in the fact that we're delivering a load that's known to the supplier up front for the duration, whereas a program like this, residents can come and go as they choose. So there's a greater degree of risk that's associated with it. So generally, any large load customer usually does better than on its own than it would through a aggregation program. But for individual homeowners, they generally do better through these municipal aggregation than they would just accepting flyers, offers that they get in the mail currently in their standalone customers.
So this would cover just private residences, private commercial as well?
And small commercial operations. If they so choose.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can I just ask one other question?
one more.
Sorry. Since customers could opt out, is there a minimum number of customers that we need to keep in order to?
No, there could be just one customer, and the supplier's still committed to their price for the term, even if everyone but one left.
Some aggregation.
Thank you.
Thank you
Okay,
very
now.
much. All right, here's the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have town manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first item is the RTS employee use policy. So we talked about this at your last meeting, providing the opportunity for town employees to participate at the RTS on the same basis as with residents. And we would ask, not hearing any comment, that the board vote to approve this policy.
Okay. Any discussion? Does someone want to make a motion?
Sure, I'll move that the select board vote to approve the select board policy SB PERS 005 RTS employee use policy.
Second.
Okay. Discussion? Hearing none, come to a vote. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We have a policy. Thank you.
Coming next to the Tree Preservation Planning Committee, we also talked about this at the last meeting. We've included a red line version in your packet. We're proposing an increase in the number of members to 11 by adding a stormwater bylaw working group member and a large house review working group member. But we did note that there may be people who serve in more than one place, so they could probably do double duty, but that would be up to the board as to whether you wanted to fill all 11, or, for instance, if there was a planning board member on large house, and it was the same person, they could serve both roles. We also added at the top of the charge that hosting a public listening session very early in the committee's work to get feedback, because we heard that people really want to be heard on this matter, so that makes sense to us. And then we added reporting on the priority tree preservations and putting in a deadline so that we can, make recommendations moving forward next year in this matter. So the deadline being in June of '25 as the board's adoption of the committee, and then we can start moving forward with populating it.
Great.
Anyone want to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that the Select Board vote to establish the Tree Preservation Planning Committee.
Okay, discussion?
I just want to observe that an 11-member committee is huge, and I wish,
It looks like it might not be, right? Because if we have members doing double duty.
well, I hope that you do, because it's a complicated issue, and getting everybody aligned will be fascinating in the timeline requested.
Anybody who's had to set up a meeting around here lately will know that.
Oh, my goodness, yeah. Just observing.
No, it's a good observation.
I'm ready to vote.
All right. We got a second, right? We're good?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Great. I have one more item, Mr. Chair.
We have a tree committee.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair and members of the board, I want to take this opportunity to let the board know that I intend to retire next summer. After almost 35 years with the town of Needham, and 23 of them as your town manager, I've decided to seek out some new adventure. I'll work closely with the board over the coming months to help manage the transition process. So there'll be a lot of opportunity to reflect on our many accomplishments together over the coming months. So I'll just say tonight that working for the town of Needham has been such an honor for me. I've worked with so many colleagues and volunteers for whom the work is not just a work or volunteer, it's really a calling. Needham is an amazing place to live and to work, and of course, as we like to say, incredibly well managed. I just say with gratitude to the board for letting me serve this time. We have a lot of work to do. We have an executive session to get to, so I'm not going anywhere right now, but I wanted to give the board that notice now, and we'll move into at your next meeting discussions about what the next steps are and what the transition plan would be for the town. I will say again, we have excellent succession planning in all of our departments. We have great cross-training and with people who are incredibly dedicated to the work. So the goal of my life is that it is as seamless in August as it is in July. So thank you very much.
Would you reconsider?
No.
You've been great. Your career here has been amazing. You've done an amazing job. Thank you. So, we're trying to make her cry. Okay. So thank you for everything you've done. Really, this is great. Is it surreal to say it here and put the words out?
Yeah, actually, I filled out some paperwork yesterday for my mother's estate, and it said occupation, and I thought, wow, what do you put when you retire?
Right.
Who are you if you're not the town manager? So that's my next blog, so just.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, we hope.
I have no words, so we're going to save them.
We'll
and
save the words.
Discuss it
Too big
tonight. Yeah.
I just will note the lack of dry eyes around the room.
It's just something in my eye, okay? That's all.
Well, one of them is my firstborn over there, so that's a surprise.
I was going to say.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
That's great.
And yes, we are incredibly well managed.
Okay.
feels wrong to move on, but
We could talk about tennis courts again.
we could talk about tennis courts. Okay. All right. All right, committee reports. Anything to add? Nothing? Yeah, I guess. All right, I'd like to mention that we had a meeting with Babson's president, Stephen Spinelli. It was great. It's nice to live next to a world-class institution. They're very, they love and eat. We love them back. Town meeting is over. And congratulations to the Hone Committee, to Katie King, and to Heidi Frail. You guys did the biggest lift ever. Congratulations. And also Park and Rec Family Fall Family Fun Day is not a tongue twister, but it's this Saturday. So be there. Great. And that's all I have. Okay. Next up, we're going to go into executive session. I would move the select board enter executive session pursuant to exception 10 to discuss trade secrets or confidential, competitively sensitive, or other proprietary information provided in the course of activities conducted as a municipal aggregator under Mass General Laws, Chapter 24, Section 134, where the disclosure of said information will adversely affect the board's ability to conduct business in relation to other entities making, selling, or distributing electric power and energy. And we are not to return to open session at the conclusion of the executive session.
Second.
Thank you. So, all those in favor?
Roll call.
Aye.
Roll call.
Roll call, thank you. Oh, there's a town council in the front, thank you. Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Frail?
Yes.
Ms. Dowd?
Yes.
Ms. Cooley?
Yes.
The chair votes yes. We are in executive session.
Miles?